whispers and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on Earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause. Welcome to The Probable Cause. This is a podcast originating out of Allen County, Indiana. We cover the courts and legal issues here in northeastern Indiana, which comprises 11 counties. I'm your host, Jamie Duffy. I am a local journalist, and to my left is Michael McAlexander. He's the Allen County Prosecutor. Trust me, he is a busy man because Fort Wayne is the second largest city in Indiana, and we are lucky to have him give us his valuable insight. Also contributing today, and she's back, I'm glad to say, is my right hand. It's still a secret who she is, but there are some of you who know who she is. You recognize her voice. So today we're going to talk about how you actually get charged with a crime. What's the procedure? A lot of you who don't have any experience with the criminal justice system, I might say they're lucky, but we had somebody ask us, and so we're going to go deep on that. But this week in courts first, Mike, what's going on with the Charles Calvert murder trial?
Nothing. It got continued on Monday. It was set to start jury selection on Monday morning. It is my understanding that the defendant basically filed a complaint in the case, making certain allegations against his attorney. I think they worked to see if they could resolve those, and ultimately, on Monday morning, a continuance was granted. I believe it's set out to June 2nd for the defendant to hire a new attorney.
So that's always interesting, and it's not surprising that there might be some disagreements between the attorney and the client. He did have John Lawrence Tompkins from Indianapolis, who also he is in charge, or he's the defense attorney for a big one coming up. I'm not exactly sure. And so we'll be there June 2nd. I'm covering that one for sure. And it is a special Noble County judge who will be presiding. His name is Stephen Klaus. And so that's that. I don't think we have anything. Yeah, go ahead.
Will he get any of his money back that he paid to his original attorneys?
I have no idea. That's not something.
Do you ever get your money back?
I think it depends on the circumstances and what was done. We try to stay out of that from our perspective. It's none of our business if they hire, and that's the relationship between any defendant and their attorney. Sometimes the court does get involved, but on this particular case, I have no information and would not really want to speculate, particularly since they were coming up on the eve of trial. So,
right, exactly.
It's tough for the family, too, when they hear something is being delayed like that, I think.
Well, and I'm sure they're paying that attorney big bucks.
Right, because it's about double if you get an attorney from Indianapolis. From my research, and this guy, because he has experience in them, he might even cost more than $500 an hour. Okay, back to the topic today, which is a criminal charge is initiated when law enforcement and sometimes a prosecutor believes there is a probable cause to believe someone has committed a crime and files charges with the court. This can occur through an arrest report, an indictment from a grand jury, or by a police officer issuing a citation for minor offenses. This is what I find online, and it's a good starting point for us to talk about. The arrest report is a police officer writes an arrest report and forwards it to the prosecutor, so that is something that we all need to understand. It doesn't necessarily originate from the prosecutor. More times it originates from law enforcement, if I'm correct. The prosecutor reviews the evidence and decides whether to file formal charges. This is something you all do every single day at the Allen County
Yes.
Prosecutor's Office because I watch my case. Then there's such a thing as the grand jury indictment, which, Then there's such a thing as a grand jury indictment, which my right hand and I would love to discuss with you because we both advocate for a grand jury, which is for more serious charges, a prosecutor may present evidence to a grand jury. We don't have one here in Allen County.
We could call one if we want. They have to be called separately.
Oh.
It's not a difficult process. I think my personal attitude has generally been for most criminal activity, I'd rather have an experienced prosecutor familiar with the law review the facts and circumstances of the case, make a determination whether we have enough evidence to have a reasonable probability of success at trial, make sure that we're following the law, and make sure the evidence supports that. That being said, I know there are people over the years that think a grand jury is some magic settlement. And there's some jurisdictions that routinely keep grand juries, maybe not permanently in Indiana, but on call pretty much. I know Marion County uses grand juries quite a bit. I know Tippecanoe County has used grand juries. As I said, my feeling for the vast majority of cases is that I'd rather have an experienced trial lawyer making that analysis than a group of lay people. Now, there are some circumstances that a grand jury becomes, I think, an appropriate vehicle when you're not sure where your community is on an issue.
Oh.
Sometimes we have laws that are either political or have moral issues involved in them that it's really not my decision or a legal decision. It's how does the community feel like this?
So a grand jury is sort of a first step toward literally a trial. If the grand jury decides, yes, you can bring charges against this person, then you have to convene yet another jury. Am I correct or not?
Well, a grand jury is used as an investigative tool and as a replacement for when, in our normal case, the police and our office do a probable cause affidavit. Mm-hmm. It may be drafted by the police officer. We may add some things to it. We then submit it to a judge. If a judge finds that there's probable cause in that to support the charges that are alleged, then that person is read the warrant and the process starts. They're then set for an initial hearing and the criminal prosecution goes. With a grand jury, you go in and the prosecutor generally defense lawyers are not allowed. Sometimes they may be able to sit with their client, but they don't have a right to present evidence. The prosecutor isn't always in a situation where they have to put everything in, and that's why a lot of grand juries get a bad name. There's a famous saying that a good prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich.
Yes, I have heard that one.
And certainly
I've never seen that happen, but...
Well, I've seen some experiences where prosecutors have put in evidence, but not all the available evidence.
And they don't have to. You just said they're not required.
No, but if you're going to have that presented at trial...
Right. You want to use that as the tool that it is and present everything that is going to be presented at trial.
Yes. I mean...
But the other thing that using it as a tool to see like what additional information you need to build the case. Does the grand jury give you information as far as that goes? Like if they choose not to indict, do they go on or are they required to go on and tell you why?
I don't know that they're required to. They are supposed to do a report. And I would say that with grand juries, the ones I've done, and we used to have to do one annually to inspect county buildings. It was the state law.
A grand jury?
And it is a little different. It's different than what you see in a traditional criminal jury because you're working with this people, and a grand jury may be in session that you call them in for 2 or 3 days at a time over a 3-month period. You can have extended times with the grand jury where you can have them, I think, up to a year or so. I know in the federal system, my brother was on a grand jury back in the 70s, and they were investigating Medicare and Medicaid fraud, and they met for a year and a half, 2 or 3 days a week.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
for every 6 weeks or so.
Did he get to keep his job?
Yes. There's a lot of protections for jury service.
Oh, that's good.
But again, the knock on grand juries is you don't present everything. The relationship usually, it's usually 6-person in the state system. It's a larger grand jury in the federal system, I think 23. But
23 people?
at least it was. They may have changed some things. But
That's a lot of people.
But you do develop a relationship with them. I mean, they're looking at you to trust because there's really no judge involved in this. The judge swears them in at the beginning and then is gone. So it's the prosecutor meeting with the grand jury. Hence there's so many
There's no
possibilities.
supervision?
Well, that's the job of the prosecutor. And if he gets an indictment, it's really on him or her if they haven't presented everything, because then they've got to go forward on the case and dispose of it one way or another. So it's a difficult process. There are a couple of areas that I think a grand jury can be useful, and I know some people have had success with. If you know there are witnesses out there that you're pretty sure have information, you can summons them in and ask them to testify. Now, they are not under an obligation to testify unless you give them immunity.
Oh,
And if you
that's
give them,
interesting too.
well, if you give them immunity, they can go anywhere. And you can't prosecute them for what they're saying. So,
Well, but isn't that true in any case? If you give somebody immunity,
Right.
they don't know.
so you better be careful what you're doing. And you may get bad information. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential missteps that can be involved there. If you have a target of an investigation, you need to notify the person that they are a target before they come in. Unless you give them immunity, you can't mandate them to talk. There's a lot of misconceptions that way, that somehow a grand jury will miraculously unseal the lips of guilty people. That's not always true. Where it is an advantage, though, that you are bringing people in that you think have information, and perhaps they may speak in front of this body.
Because they're protected.
Well, because it's secret. They may disclose things or information that they're not comfortable telling a police officer.
Would this be an advantage in like a civil case?
This is for criminal.
Just only for criminal, okay. Yes,
Isn't it a criminal charge to divulge any information
Yes.
given to a grand jury or people that testify?
Yes.
Yeah, disclosing grand jury proceedings. And that gets into another sticky wicket. If you have a high-profile case, frequently grand juries have also been used in cases where you have political figures accused of something, where, at least in Indiana, where your prosecutors all run for office as Republicans or Democrats, or I guess independents. But if you've got evidence of a crime committed by a political official, there's always that undercurrent of, oh, you didn't charge him because you're a Democrat and he's a Democrat, or you charged him because he's a Republican and you're a Democrat.
right. You could have that,
So
definitely.
a grand jury can sometimes
And I'm sure
give
that
you
goes on, so,
some protection that way.
yeah.
But that's where you then get into the other side of it with, if you don't give them all the information, and it's secret, you can really harm somebody's reputation.
Well, you get charged with something, your reputation's down the drain anyway. So that grand jury, that was very interesting, actually. So there's another example here, citation. For minor offenses, a police officer can issue a citation directly to the individual. I don't know why that's just one of the ways that you might get involved in a criminal procedure.
Well, as a matter of fact, that came up a week or so ago. I think one of the local stations mentioned somebody who was stopped by a Indiana State Trooper on 469 and clocked him at 132 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And he cited him in or summonsed him in. It was still going to be for a misdemeanor reckless driving, but
Because he had not been charged
but because
prior.
he was just given paperwork on it, it looked like, oh, this guy's getting away with a traffic ticket.
Right.
So
But actually, it was standard procedure, is what you're trying to say.
it can be. I think more and more under bail reform, when we've released more people, officers have that discretion that they can summon somebody in instead of taking the time to arrest them, take them down, book them in, write the report, write the probable cause affidavit. It takes a lot of time out of their day. And I think if they know that the person is likely to be released on their own recognizance anyways, why not save everybody a lot of time and trouble and just cite
Right.
them?
And you should add that if he doesn't show up for court,
Then he gets a warrant.
he gets a
for
warrant.
failure to appear.
You might have the SWAT team at your door. Oh boy, can't imagine. So in all cases, there must be a probable cause to believe the individual committed the alleged crime before charges are filed. That's why we call this show the probable cause, because it's at the root of everything, right? It's the root of everything in England. It's the root of everything in France, where I will be going and delving into things tomorrow. I'm taking off. Today is Earth Day, by the way, so happy Earth Day to everyone. Important considerations. Review by the prosecutor. Even after an arrest, the prosecutor has the discretion to decide whether to file charges and what the nature of the charges will be. Because I know there's maybe a detective that thinks it's ag-bat, right, or aggravated battery, but prosecution is leaning toward murder.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. If anybody has a comment on that. I noticed you were looking in your little book of all kinds of rules.
Well, it's not all kind of rules. It's called the U.S. Constitution.
Okay. Bravo.
And everybody talks about probable cause, and everybody talks about search and seizure.
Yes.
So I thought I'd just read the Fourth Amendment, because there is so much of criminal law that revolves around this, both in seizing of evidence, seizing of people. But it says simply, it's only one paragraph,
Okay.
the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Now, I really like that. You read it just like you were in church. Didn't he? Okay, that was great, and we should all remember that, because I was thinking about doing due process today too. We might wait. My son, the lawyer, he's a human rights attorney, and we did end up talking about due process, but you have really covered it right there. Fourth Amendment, is that the first paragraph or not?
That's the only paragraph in the Fourth Amendment.
Only paragraph.
That is the Fourth Amendment.
That is the Fourth Amendment. And
Now,
you know what?
there
I
has
will
been-
be posting this on the probable cause page.
There has been a ton of cases written about the Fourth Amendment.
Okay.
And I didn't count up the number of words, but it's probably produced more litigation in the criminal world than any other amendment.
Even freedom of speech.
We have a lot more criminals than we do. than we do civil disputes over freedom of speech.
Okay. Yeah, well, as a journalist, I'm thinking about that. Okay. So here we have, now we're talking about, that was reviewed by prosecutor. Now we're talking about a summons. Instead of an arrest, a summons may be issued requiring the individual to appear in court on a specific date. We did cover that with your great example of the guy going 132 miles on I-469. And, you know, it would be interesting to follow up and see what's happened to that guy. Was that Allen County or another one? Do you know, happen to remember?
Well, if it was 469, I think it's Allen County.
Probably. I don't know that it got.
I will say that as far as just general 101 about arrests, there are some exceptions, but generally misdemeanors are committed in the presence of an officer. And so, like in the situation with the guy going that fast, he could have been arrested and brought in, or he could be summoned in, and you can do that on a misdemeanor. You can also, we have warrantless arrest and arrest with warrant. If a police officer has probable cause to believe that somebody has done something, and we see that a lot in domestic violence cases,
I was just going to say
where
that.
an officer goes to the scene, maybe see somebody with a black eye or a bloody lip or something, a bloody nose, and based on the statements that are given, they then have probable cause to arrest one of the parties for domestic violence. So they can do it that way. Generally, if it wasn't in their presence, they will go and create a probable cause affidavit and then request an arrest warrant and ask that a judge review that, and then a warrant is issued.
Okay, so you guys out there, keep that in mind. The next thing is no guilt established, and you always bring this one up. I appreciate it. Being charged with a crime does not mean a person is guilty. It simply means the state believes there's enough evidence to bring the case to court.
Mm-hmm. And actually, our burden, I think, is a little higher than that, because we also ethically have to have a reasonable belief that we can be successful at trial.
Okay.
But that is one of the things that that I go back to the analysis by a trained trial lawyer as to who I want to evaluate a case, because you have to look sometimes at issues that is this something that the general public will support? Is it something that the general public feels is a crime? We have a couple of instances. I'll use domestic violence in a sense. If I say somebody got strangled, the common perception is that somebody had their hands around their neck and the victim is choking, tongue
gasping
stuck
for
out,
breath,
gasping for breath, and there's going to be marks left and all the rest of that.
Right.
Well, one thing that I think some of the cases that have been done that have alleged police brutality, where you can suffocate and be strangled by pressure, either cutting off your oxygen supply or cutting off your blood supply. So like the Minnesota case, George Floyd,
right?
He could, I believe you could hear him say, "I can't breathe." Well,
right.
What do you mean you can't breathe if you can't hear that? Well, that's where his blood supply to the brain was being cut off and caused his death.
Yes.
So there's different ways medically that you can describe strangulation, but you do have to look at what is your jury pool going to look at. And so sometimes we have laws that are written kind of awkwardly, I guess I'd say. And you have to take that into account. Is a jury going to understand this?
Well, that's where it's up to you to explain
Yes.
very well. You get Dr. Bill Smock here if you have to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's an expert on strangulation, and I remember doing stories on this, particularly when I was at the Journal-Gazette, where the effects of strangulation may not show up until 20 years later, when somebody has a stroke out of the blue. I mean, that guy is so knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot from him. So right at this time you're getting strangled, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have that stroke, but it could cause problems.
But that's an example of when the general public looks at strangulation, they have certain expectations of what evidence they're going to get. and they may not always get that evidence because, or they'll get educated. But that's kind of the trick that sometimes we run into as well, that you want somebody to look at that as, is the defendant somebody that comes across as very sympathetic, vulnerable, self-defense?
A little bit of
you have
theater.
to look at.
A little bit of theater going on in there.
Well, you have to look at all of
Will
that.
she cry tears in the box? We're going to do a Perry Mason on this one.
Well, those are the things that you look at. There's a lot of different factors that go into what success will be at a trial. Everyone who's done very many trials has been in courtrooms where at the end of it, they wonder, gee, I presented that evidence. How did they get to this verdict? But that's where the independence of a jury can really be different than the lawyer's perception.
Well, and the effectiveness of the defense attorney, too.
Some of that, but
we've got some good ones.
You do enough
here.
of these, and they're going to be ones that you say, I'm surprised I won. And there's other ones you're going to say, I don't understand why I lost. Were we all in the same room for the last 3 days? But there's a lot of subtleties to all of this, and a lot of judgment about what is fair, what is justice. And in my view, a good prosecutor tries to look at all of that.
Well, we hope that Lady Justice prevails in all cases, but she doesn't always. Last point before we go into a very interesting case, Mike had a pivotal role in it, not just as a prosecutor, is the right to defense. Once charged, the individual has the right to a legal defense and to a fair trial. That is one of the basics of American justice. Anybody disagree?
No.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to ask everyone to go back to September 11th of 2016 because we've got a story to tell. Officers responded to a call around 4 a.m. Actually, they got the 911 dispatch got a call at 3:54, and the phone went dead. It was Consuela Arrington. And I figure at that point in time, she'd been stabbed and shot. I could check, but both of them. Dispatch called back because they heard gunshots and a struggle in that phone call. So, and it's their due diligence anyway, isn't it, when they get a phone call and there's a hang-up, okay? They immediately called back like they always do, and there was no answer. Then, at 3:59, so approximately 5 minutes later, Consuela's brother, Damian Arrington, called 911 to say his niece and nephew had been shot. The person who did all this bloody handiwork was Marcus Dansby. And people really remember this case because of the horrific nature of it. He ended up killing 4 people, including an unborn baby. And he used a knife, he used a gun, and am I missing anything in that?
The young teenager that was also shot that recovered.
I was going to bring her up. That it was his niece and his nephew, but his sister was already dead on the couch. So the first people to respond, the first one to respond was Captain Tim Hughes. He was a sergeant then. He was a sergeant on C shift on the southeast side. He was the initial officer with officers Jake Lemish and Chris Felton, who were right behind him. Chris Felton is now a sergeant with the gang unit, unless anything's changed. Then came Luke McDonald, who was now a homicide detective with the FWPD, and he got the job of patting Marcus Dansby down. Now, I had it right here because this guy was clowning, all right? It says, Marcus held his hand and arms under his body near his waistband and lay on his stomach. Marcus Dansby then refused the command of Officer McDonald and said, "Don't do this to me." Marcus Dansby finally relaxed and was patted down. Officer Luke McDonald located a large knife with a broken handle in his right front's pocket. The knife was stained with blood. Then they discovered the bodies of Consuela. And the way I picture them, they were all on the couch, kind of had fallen asleep. It was around 4 a.m.
No.
No? Okay, go ahead. Tell us. We can talk about it because it's adjudicated.
Just a little background, because I don't think people always understand this. With our office, we get notified on major crimes, particularly homicides, fatal traffic accidents, that type of thing. We're also available 24/7 to police officers to probably the most common reason is assist with search warrants. We don't necessarily direct their investigation, but we do consult on a lot of major cases. So when you see somebody charged with murder the night of or something, it's usually after there's been a consultation with members of our staff and the police department. But it is routine for us to be called out. We currently operate with 8 teams on a weekly rotation.
Teams. Okay.
Of 3 or 4 people that can share that responsibility for attending to scenes and or assisting with getting search warrants.
Okay, so tell us, because we know you were there. We're going to get to that part.
Well,
where were I know Dajiana was upstairs. Mm-hmm. She'd been shot in the head, and she was 8.5 months pregnant.
She was in a bed, yes.
She was dead. Mm-hmm. Okay, so where were Consuela and Traven and TH, who was 14 years old?
Mom was, I believe, at the bottom of the steps and had been stabbed. It was a fairly narrow staircase up to the 2nd floor. Mm-hmm. The young man was in the kitchen.
Traven, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And where was he in the kitchen?
Kind of in the doorway between the kitchen and what I'd call the dining room. I mean, this is a relatively small house, so they're not real large rooms. But yeah, it was.
And then what about the little girl who survived, the 14-year-old?
Well, by the time I got there, she'd been taken to the hospital.
Oh, okay.
But I believe she was shot just inside the door. But we respond to these scenes, or a member of our staff will, or talk with the people or the officers before things. So I know myself and another deputy responded to that scene that early morning and did a walkthrough of the house after the police had done their initial photographs and tried to render aid or determine that people were dead. Right,
and so it also says that TH, I interviewed her when I was with the paper, and her uncle, Damian Arrington, who made the second phone call. And it says here that she went to the hospital with sharp force trauma and gunshot wounds. So he used that knife on her too. All right, so how do you handle a scene like that? I mean, I know you've been to other scenes. Our goal
is to review it so we can make a better decision about the case ultimately. Just like your question, where was the body? Especially sometimes in these smaller houses, a report might say they were in the kitchen when they were kind of straddling the kitchen and the living room. We've had that kind of stuff. You're also trying to get a sense of how did this happen? Mm-hmm. What went on, because later you're going to be examining if the defendant makes any statements. Is that consistent with the scene? Is it consistent with the evidence and the facts that you know? So that goes into a lot of it. And I know for myself, you're also trying to anticipate, okay, if we charge this person, I remember being on one that it clearly started, or it looked like it was a self-defense kind of case. At least that's what the homeowner was going to say. And so I asked to have pictures taken at that point, both from the exact angle where the prospective defendant said he was when he shot, and exactly where the victim was when he was shot.
But when you got there...
But in this case...
Yeah.
It's more to get that background to see exactly what happened.
You didn't know when you got there what happened. Everybody's piecing things together, right?
I will say, and that's why the police are generally very reluctant to give a ton of details right at the beginning because we don't know a lot.
Right.
I mean, we get a one-line page usually referencing a shooting at 3100 Oak Street, and you don't know who was shot or by whom. And so often that initial information turns out.
I mean,
to
and there
not
were
be
so many
accurate.
bodies in this one.
Yes.
One of the things that was interesting, Brian Martin, by the way, wrote this probable cause. It said here that Damian Arrington said he was sleeping in the basement with his girlfriend and that he heard gunshots and what sounded like or somebody running around on the ground floor of the home. He goes up from the basement and he sees a muzzle flash in the kitchen. So that must have been when he was shooting Traven. I mean, if he saw a muzzle shot, unless he was just shooting off his gun.
Yeah.
So he saw the crimes in the process. And yet, when you get there, you don't know Marcus Dansby from Damian Arrington.
No.
It could be, I mean...
No, and I think that just tells you what police... Usually by the time a member of our office is there, EMS has been there, the police have the yellow tape up, the scene is secure. We don't have lights and sirens.
But don't you wish you did?
One of my predecessors did have a Kojak light at one point.
Oh, no kidding.
But no, as I said, we're there to advise, offer any help that we can, help with search warrants, that kind of stuff. And we do like to view the scene and see what went on. So on this case, my involvement, I mean, other people handled the case to try it, or it ended up going to a plea. We originally filed the death penalty application on it, and he eventually pled guilty, and I believe got 300 years.
Yeah, I was reading one of the news reports. It was over 200 for sure.
But my little involvement on this also goes to, in this case, after everybody had viewed the scene, the crime scene techs were there for quite a while. There was a lot of blood in that home.
And he was giving all sorts of explanations,
Yes,
Marcus
he was talking.
Dansby.
So
he was cooperating, but he was also saying a cat scratched him. He was, before Mike gets into his good story, he was covered in blood, which is one of the reasons they needed you. Let me see, covered in blood, and was putting a sheet or something on Consuelo, who was dead or dying. And Damian Arrington is like, what are you doing here? He says that Marcus Dansby had not been in that house for 6 months because he learned that Dejanna's baby was not his. We seem to think that was the motivation for these horrible crimes. Do you agree?
I'm not sure that I agree, because I believe he was ultimately found to be the father.
Oh, he was?
If I remember right, I think so. I'm not
Wow.
100% sure.
All that.
But it was never super clear which way he, what pushed him or why. And I don't think he ever really disclosed what
Well, his mother said that he had
reasons were.
taken anger management and issues, and he was at Park Center. But still, I mean...
He didn't have much of a criminal record, if any.
Yeah, so you're searching for...
But the standard protocol is, if we have witnesses, they're advised of their rights. And he was one that wanted to explain. His stories didn't always make sense consistently with the evidence that was at the scene. But my little part of this irony, I guess, is down in the police department, they have several interview rooms. And then there are monitors in some other rooms, so other detectives and officers and prosecutors can watch the interview as it's going on live.
So you went down there for that?
So we went down to the police station.
Okay.
And were watching the interview. Well, he was being cooperative and still talking.
He wasn't like crying and over-emoting, and I mean, he was really clowning in this thing.
Well,
to use the phrase.
We're not, we're gathering information more than anything at this point. And, he looked like the obvious suspect, but we've been in this too many times where what seemed obvious at the beginning turned out not to be.
And there was another
correct.
person there.
So, but he was cooperative. He had blood all over his clothes. He was willing to give up his clothes and consent to it. Well, normally they keep some like old hospital scrubs in the detective bureau for people to wear if they need to change the clothes, either due to soiling or because the clothes could be evidence. But for whatever reason, they had a jumpsuit, if I remember right, from the jail, and they didn't think that was the right message to send, to put him in orange.
Right, because, right, yeah. Go ahead.
So they did have a pair of, I think, scrubs of the pants for the bottom, but they didn't have any shirts. Well, I had on, this is early September, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I had like a t-shirt and then a blue denim shirt on. And, all the police officers are in uniform.
Right.
And, vests and their standard stuff. So,
and they can't go grab a police thing.
so we're talking. And I said, well, heck, you can have my shirt.
The shirt off your back, Mike.
So I took off my denim shirt and gave it to him, and they took it over, and he continued to talk and cooperate.
Did he say thank you?
I never talked to him.
So we do have a picture of the mugshot, and yes, he is very much wearing he's wearing a denim shirt, so I can only believe that the prosecutor was telling the truth. And also, it's amazing that you did have a t-shirt on underneath.
Well, what was funny is that his mugshot was taken then in that shirt. And so as this case got a lot of publicity over the years because it had the death penalty and
because it was so horrific. I mean,
and
so many people and killed 2 different ways.
And so whenever the TV stations or the newspapers would do a story on it, they would always put his picture in, and they used his mugshot. So I got to see my shirt umpteen times for the next 2 or 3 years while that case pended.
Very good.
And there was a joke I was going to get the thing back, but I never got it back.
Oh, well, where is it now? It's probably
in his property.
I would say it's in his property, and probably because he still had, the blood on him and everything else. And
but it was probably one of the worst crimes in the last 20 years.
Oh yeah, it was. It was something that really shook up the city. Yeah. It was sort of like the Zents,
very
Sarah
similar.
Zent and her 3 children, and we'll never forget that either. And Damian Arrington was really good to me as a reporter and a journalist. I had a long talk with him. I tried to contact him and didn't respond to me on Facebook. I don't know how he's doing. I don't know how you live through something like that. And we can always say, oh, I hope you got counseling. But I don't think you don't ever really recover from anything like that. It all depends on what your mind is like as to whether you have recurring nightmares or not.
Well, I think that's something that your right hand might be able to comment on.
Are you still there, my right hand?
I am.
Because this was right before you lost your son. Mm-hmm. Like 3 months. September to December, yeah. I have to do this. October, November, December, yeah. It's 3 months, and then you were in the same position. And yeah, someday we will, when you're ready to come forward with your story. But right now, I wouldn't. And how are you doing, by the way? Because people are asking me.
Doing well.
Good.
I mean, as far as dealing with crime scenes and things like that, at first it was really scary to me to think about that. But now we see on Nosy Neighbors that SWAT is somewhere, I want to go over there, see what's going on. I am now a nosy neighbor, I guess.
Well, no, you're really good. You're a journalist at heart, because you'll go over there and you'll get your phone out and you're recording and live streaming and giving the people and the public what they want to know. And she's got a good nose for it. So, well, with that, anyway, Mike, thank you.
Be careful when you go to crime scenes to not give up their staging areas and things like that. So
Yeah, they don't like it if you come too close, because there was no yellow tape in one homicide a few years ago. And I was just walking for, I had no idea what, it was on Lake Avenue, Champion the Barber. And I was walking along Lake Avenue. All of a sudden, a detective, I guess he was, he said, "Get out of here," and turned around and he gave me a shove on my back. And I'll never forget, I was insulted. But
Well, I mean, you got to remember that the police have a job to do.
right.
And if you don't preserve a crime scene, you lose it forever. And it is really important that they not be disturbed. That's why we're always so careful about going in to crime scenes. I know I instruct my people after doing this for 40 years. Don't touch anything. Keep your
Absolutely.
hands in your pockets. Just really be careful. Don't do anything to impact the scene or the evidence. And because you can't recreate it if you've lost it.
Well, also, if everybody's got their camera out. So if they're taking photos of what you're doing or video, of course, usually it's video now, and they see somebody going up and getting involved with the scene, that can work against your office.
Well, and the other thing that sometimes goes on, families hear about it through social media or phone calls.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Before there's, sometimes before we've even fully identified the victim.
I know, I've had that complaint more than once.
And it is very awkward to be there. I mean, I've been in positions where I've got family members asking questions because we're inside the ropes, and very reluctant to give out any information, partially because I don't always trust the information we have at that moment, because if it turns out to be wrong, I mean, I think many of us remember that horrible case with the Taylor University students, probably 15 years ago or more, that were killed in a car crash.
Oh, yeah,
and
I
they
heard
were
about it.
improperly identified. One of the girls was in a coma for like 2 months, and they'd identified her as being dead. So you hate to say anything, but you're also dealing with a lot of very, very raw emotion. And for a parent who thinks their child has been killed, they're not at their best. You wouldn't expect them to be.
No?
But the police are in a very difficult spot at that point of trying to do their jobs, but at the same time being respectful of the families.
Well, my right hand has a story. She was there, and they wouldn't let her go near her son. So it was, I know you're quiet, so I know you don't want to talk about it. So
well, I'm just waiting for a break. I don't want to talk over anybody.
you can do that.
But it really was a very emotional situation, and like I had already received a call saying that it was Cody back there, but the police wouldn't let me go back there, wouldn't confirm or deny if it was him. Like I was telling them about his tattoos, and they wouldn't tell me anything. And that was at like 10 o'clock at night. They didn't finally call me to tell me anything till 2:30 in the morning. So that's very traumatic for the families waiting to find out, especially when there's more than one victim. You know, like, is mine the one that's deceased, or is mine the one that lived? Like, that trauma waiting for that information is just horrible.
And I don't know how it could ever be,
There's not a good way to do it.
I know, it couldn't be anything but horrible, but the weight makes it, I suppose, worse. I remember being at a scene early on when I took over the cops beat, and a 55-year-old man had been shot on the porch. I think it was Avondale or something like that, if you remember. And his brother had been with him. And when I came up on the scene, there was a girl there. It still gives me a lump in my throat even when I think about it. And she just kept crying out, "I need to know if that's my daddy." And she was a grown woman. I need to know if that's my daddy. I want to see my daddy. And they would not let her in. And I was just like, oh my God, if we could just escort her like 5 feet away rather than the 50 feet we were, it would have, I know the rules and everything, but it was heartbreaking. So.
No, as I said, it's a tough thing for everybody.
Yeah.
Clearly the families want answers, but you don't want to give them the wrong information.
Absolutely not.
So
you can't give them the wrong information. And I know that's one of the reasons you're the Allen County prosecutor is you've got all your years of experience. Can you imagine somebody who just got elected with no experience? I hate to think. So anyway, this is probably a good time because we've really run on this one. I don't think we've gone on too long. I think we always have fabulous conversations. I just want to say that tomorrow I am leaving. First, I'm going to Oxfordshire. And Oxford, I've been to the magistrate court and the Crown Court before. I'm going to try and get some of the barristers and the prosecutors over there to talk to me just about how they do things. I've already seen some of the trials over there. Of course, I didn't cover them, but I had some great experiences. And then I'm going to go to Normandy and back to Alençon. I think I've told you all before, I did attend an attempted murder trial, and he was convicted, and he definitely did it, and he got 10 years for it. And I have some literature here. It's the jobs that you have in the justice, and, of course it is French, but, it's like here's somebody there. You can see that they wear a little bit different costume than what you guys wear. That's cool, though, don't you think? Really, really cool. And when you get there, you get into the spirit of it. So I will be posting from there. So I'm hoping that you all will follow the probable cause on our website, which is, and I'll say it correctly this time, www.theprobablecause.com. Also on our Facebook page, The Probable Cause. I have posted something on there that I didn't post on my regular page. It was a probable cause that I ran across. So until next time, which will be a few weeks from now, this has been The Probable Cause. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye. This episode is filmed and edited by Frosty Pictures. The Probable Cause is produced by Maumee Media.
Worried when I crossed the Michigan line, a cop from Steuben County waiting on I-69. A headlamp went out while he pulled me over. Charged me with possession after I rolled down the window.
Now that's skunk.
Indians a trick when it comes to weed. It's like who doesn't smoke or use gummies? Your grandpa, your brother, your rich friend from school? Hell, throwing the whole courthouse and my attorney too. It's time those assholes change these stupid laws. It ain't worth the paper for a probable cause. Sitting on a bar stool in my usual place, this guy next to me said he was looking for some cocaine. Hell, I just sold him an 8-ball with a little piece off for me. But my buyer was a cop? Should've known he was a creep. So I'm a dealer, right? You gotta be kidding. It's a rich man's drug. I just take it because I'm injured. 8 years in Westville with a monkey on my back. There's more drugs in here than you can shake a shank at. One dirty drug test, man, this system's flawed. Undercover screwed me in my probable cause. Street crimes never did me no favors. I'm hooked on Fetty. I'm a junkie, not a felon. Told that son of a bitch on the way to lockup. I can't seem to shake it. I need help, not mocking. What do you want from someone who's been through the system? Drugs all through the house before mom and dad went to prison. Throw me in jail and give me a fine? Someday I'll be dead and away from your kind. Now I'm at the courthouse in front of a judge. Can't say my public defender cares for me much. Crimes are committed on both sides of the law. God help me now with this probable cause. C-shift never gets old. Anything can happen when you're out on patrol. You think I'm just eating donuts, man? Give me a break. Nothing on this job is a piece of cake. Lights and sirens activated. This knucklehead wants to chase. Baby mama at the scene just spit in my face. Wife's worried that someday I won't be pulling up at all. You'll read about my killer in a probable cause. Man. She went through my phone and she seen my text. I told her forget it. It was just my ex. She took a swing and knocked me flat. Man, I went wild and hit her back. Judge slapped me with a no contact order. Now she's got the kids and she's staying with her mother. So she started it all and I have to take the fall. You can read my whole story in the probable cause. When I was young, caught a case for dealing and did my time. Yeah, I got a record, but I was doing fine. Running my own business on the southeast side. Yeah, I got a gun. I kept it on hand. Told the cop my reason, thought he'd understand. In this neighborhood, you need some protection. Attorney attorney thought I could get just community corrections, but the judge decided to send me to prison. Can't get ahead no matter how hard I try. Read the probable cause, it'll make you cry.
Whispers and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause.